So how do we improve our ability to achieve the priorities that were articulated by Mr. Deasy? Well, one of the ways we plan to do that is by leveraging our authority under 10 U.S.C. 2371B, which is other transaction authority for prototype projects. So I briefed the same topic last year at this event and gave sort of a OTA 101. I'm going to try to go more in depth during this briefing and kind of update you as to where we're at today. And let me tell you, there is just a lot of buzz about this topic. It seems like everybody wants an OTA. In fact, on Saturday, I took my son to the Auburn Texas A&M game. Now, I don't hear so well, and the crowd started chanting, "All the way, all the way." And I could have swore they were saying OTA, OTA. Okay. You know, Mr. Montemurano had made a comment about OTA. We'll use them when it's appropriate to do so. Okay. OTAs have been around, well, been around ever since Eisenhower signed the legislation creating NASA in the wake of Sputnik. So what's changed? Why have they become suddenly the talk of the town? Well, in 2016, Congress did change the law in 4 very important ways. They raised the threshold for approval. They opened the aperture on what constitutes a prototype. They made it easier to move from the prototype to the production phase. And they also defined what is considered a non-traditional defense contractor. And I'll explain this, what I'm talking about here in a moment as we go through our presentation. Okay, so when can an OTA be used? So the first step in the process, a customer comes, a mission partner comes to us and says, hey, I have this requirement, I have this need, and we sit down with them and talk about it and say, hey, what is it that you're trying to achieve here? Probably, well, I don't want to say 9 out of 10 times, but certainly the vast majority of the times, we kind of talk them out of doing an OTA because it's just not appropriate. It's a, you know, first come to us and explain why I cannot procure this requirement under typical FAR-based rules, okay? So although the rules and regs don't apply, so OTAs are non-FAR-based binding contracts, the statute, we have to make sure that what they're trying to accomplish meets the intent of the statute, okay? So first, it has to be a proposed, the work by the nature results in a prototype. And the next slide I'm going to describe, talk a little bit about what a prototype is. And also the proposed work has to be directly relevant to enhancing the mission effectiveness of the military and their supporting platforms, either to be acquired or that are currently being in use. Now, many have interpreted, when you say military platforms, you're talking major weapons programs, right? Not necessarily. This is a platform. So Mr. Deasy talked about this platform, right? Okay, what constitutes a prototype? I don't want to read these slides verbatim to you. You can see them as you will. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical. It can be virtual. So I take this platform, and Mr. Deasy mentioned about how do I do assured identity, okay? I can't stick a CAC card in this mobile device, right? There's technology out there today through AI and machine learning that this phone gets to know who I am by the way I hold it, the way I talk into it, the way I type in it. It learns me. So when this phone is sitting down, some individual walks up, it won't work. But when I pick it up, it knows me. Hi, Scott, how are you doing? And it works for me. That could be a prototype. So who can get an OTA? If you're a large business, Mr. Montemurano had mentioned that you could get an OTA, but you would have to have a couple of things, either a 1/3 cost sharing, or you've partnered with a non-traditional defense contractor who's participating to a significant extent, or the participants of the effort are also either small businesses or non-traditional defense contractors. So what is a non-traditional defense contractor? Definition of a non-traditional defense contractor is any entity that has not administered contracts that were subject to full CAS compliance, cost accounting standards, for 12 months prior to the issuance of a solicitation. Now, since no small businesses are required to administer CAS-compliant contracts or to have the capability to administer cost accounting standards, they by default qualify under the statute. That's, okay. I mentioned one of the other changes. If during the performance of the prototype, you get to a point where this prototype is successful and you competed the prototype initially, you do not have to do a further competition to move into a production phase. This is a significant change. I would also add, if we go through a consortium, and I'll talk a little bit about that may be our strategy here going forward. If we use a consortium, our OTA is actually with the consortium, but if we have a successful prototype and we go into production, my OTA is not going to be with the consortium, it would be directly with the firm who did the prototype. And it can either be an OTA or it could be a production contract. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we're going to find here is how do we market these OTAs? We're really trying to get the non-traditional defense contractors, and they're not out there looking at Fed biz ops. So that's why we may partner with a consortium. They're the ones who are sort of the matchmakers, if you will. That's one strategy. Events like this is another way we're going to reach the folks, non-traditional and small businesses. We have tables set up out there, and our 2 agreements officers are with us today. We'll be there. And I think we put a fishbowl out there collecting business cards, right? So we're going to develop an address list. Okay, I'm kind of hurrying through these slides because what I really want to get to is, and talk more in depth on this one here. Okay, so this is the process. So the mission partner comes to us and we develop a statement of need. Well, first, of course, have that conversation, that dialogue. Does this really meet the statute? Is it a prototype? Is it enhancing military effectiveness? If we agree that it sounds like this is a good candidate for an OTA, we develop what we call a statement of need. Okay, the statement of need comes through myself, the program manager, and Mr. Packard approves it. So that's the first very key step, and we get Office of General Counsel very much involved in that. So we want to make sure there's this misnomer out there that OTAs cannot be protested through GAO. That is true. The OTA itself can't, but the use of the OTA for that particular requirement has been challenged, and successfully, with GAO. So we're very, very careful that we're not abusing this authority. With this responsibility comes great, with this authority comes great responsibility, and we take that very seriously. So we really scrutinize these. So after we get the statement of need, we then go out with a request for white papers. Now, the requests for white papers are typically a problem statement, a capability gap, something along those lines. And then the white papers are submitted, and they're usually limited to about 10 pages. We then evaluate the white papers in 4 areas: relevancy, innovation, technical feasibility, and company viability. Okay. We then down select either one or several. You may want to run multiple prototypes, but once we've done the down select, we would then get a proposal from the contractor. And what we will typically do, and this is where we really deviate from the normal way of doing business. So in the normal way of doing business, right, mission partner comes to us with a requirement. It's typically got some performance parameters, something along those lines. They develop a detailed statement of work or a performance work statement. They hand it to the acquisition team. It develops acquisition strategy, hands it to the contracting team, who then procures it. And there's usually no talking between the contractor and the government at this point. Not under this scenario. Once we've made this down select based on the evaluation of the white papers, it's a collaborative process. So we would give the vendor a draft of an OT, as our sort of going in position to negotiate terms and conditions, price, deliverables, milestones, back and forth, back and forth. It's very much a collaborative process. And at the end, we come up with a written agreement. Okay, I was very leery about showing this slide. Okay, this is a stretch goal. And this is also if all the stars line up correctly. But the process begins once we have that statement of need, and quite frankly, that's the majority of the time, is make sure we got a well-defined statement of need, and we've really done our homework to determine, yes, in fact, this is really a good candidate for OT. Now, we may revisit this in a year or so from now. There's, again, a misconception that, you know, OTAs are fast. They can be fast, but they may not be fast. It all depends on the negotiation, too. If you got bogged down in some lengthy discussion about intellectual property rights, data rights, they're going to be anything but fast. So I guess in closing, OTA authorities, they provided significant options over the traditional process. They're not appropriate options in all circumstances, and we very much scrutinize the requirement to make sure that we're not circumventing FAR, circumventing competition. That's not our goal here. The primary goal of the OT is to encourage engaging non-traditional defense contractors in performing the work, and not to award agreements quickly. So speed can be a side effect of the OT flexibility, but it all depends on the negotiation issues and the internal processes. Okay, I'd like to open it up for questions. I suspect I have a few.
Mr. Stewart, your first question. Please clarify which OTAs DISA may use.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Clarify which OTAs we will use?
Yes, sir. Please clarify which OTAs DISA may use.
I'm not sure I know how to answer that. It's, I think what you're talking more about is what requirements, capability gaps, problems are we looking to solve through the use of an OTA? And I think those were mentioned earlier. AI is one of them. Admiral Norton mentioned about cloud-based internet isolation. That may be one. I talked about assured identity for a mobile device. How about developing an application or where I can develop apps on the mobile device that actually conform to DoD security requirements? That might be an example of an OTA. Okay, hopefully I scratch that itch.
Mr. Stewart, we're receiving another question now.
Okay.
If I could ask you to just stand by.
I can hear him typing now.
Thank you, sir. Great job, by the way.
That's it?
No, sir, we do have a question.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sir.
And I said, oh, okay. I was so close.
There's a feeling in industry that OTAs are generally used to select a preferred product or solution. Can you please describe the selection oversight process used to ensure fair competition when using OTAs? Okay,
so I mentioned the 4 evaluation factors that we would use to evaluate the white papers. The reason, if you're familiar with the BAA process, it's very, very similar. Now, we modeled our process after DIU. We're also taking best practices from AFRL and also Army Contracting Command New Jersey. And we're modeling it on the commercial solutions opening process. Now, the thing that's key about that is that I don't have a defined requirement. I'm asking you for a solution. So it's, a lot of times it would be then comparing an apple and an orange. So it's going to seem a little, you know, it's not a hard and defined, here's my evaluation factor, here's your past performance, here's price. because they're different. So again, we look at, is it innovative? Is the company viable? Is it relevant to what we're trying to solve here? Is it technically feasible? And those will be documented processes, and those will be provided to whoever doesn't get a request for final proposal. Okay?
Sir, what consortiums are you utilizing for your OTA management, execution, and distribution? C5, SOSEC, Cornerstone, etc.
Right. So if we do go the route of consortium, they pretty much kind of do the back office work, if you will, but also they're our matchmaker for finding those non-traditional defense contractors. So you can do point to point, and that's what we're going to do on these first batch. I got about 5 in the hopper right now. But depending on the demand signal, I don't think we'll have the resources, and we're not going to have the visibility into industry leaders to execute a cogent strategy and we'll need a consortium. That's just my opinion. That final decision hasn't been made. That would be, of course, Mr. Packard's. But I think we're building that case right now. That's probably a smart way to do it.
Does DISA view an OTA submission led by a non-traditional defense contractor more favorably than a submission led by a traditional contractor with significant participation by non-traditional?
No, absolutely not. But, the authority was really put in place. Initially, I mentioned it was a Sputnik moment. So I think our leadership kind of feeling we're in a Sputnik moment now. And I think each of us out there probably should be feeling the same way. But we don't drive a lot of the technology and innovation. So yeah, we're trying to get the innovators in these fields. But a lot of them don't want to play with the government, or a lot of them can't. A lot of them don't have the cost accounting systems, or they're not going to give up their intellectual property. I did want to clarify one thing. Now I realize I was remiss. When you partner, say if you're a large business, you partner with a non-traditional defense contractor, and I use that term to a significant degree, that doesn't mean like the typical 51% rule for small business. Significant extent could be maybe you bring a proprietary solution or some intellectual property to the fight. So that's why I want to make it clear that it depends on the nature of the work, the innovative solution. It's not driven by who the contractor is. But large businesses, small businesses, non-traditional defense contractors can all play in this sphere. Okay.
One more question, sir. Are you issuing topics from the government to industry? If so, how? Through the consortiums or through DISA?
Well, not through the consortiums at this time. So we'll put it out on FBO. We'll send through our market research. I have identified maybe a handful of companies that are playing in this sphere. We'll send the request for white papers directly to them. But we don't have an OTA with a consortium at this point, but we're considering that.
We do have one more question, sir. Can you,
like I said, it's a really hot topic. So.
Can you elaborate on what Mr. Montemurano mentioned regarding the challenges around incorporating Agile and OTAs?
Maybe I should let Mr. Montemurano answer that one. But a prototype could be an Agile solution, right? So I'd mentioned that it doesn't have to be a physical, tangible prototype. It can be a process. So I know that Air Force, through ACC New Jersey and Defense Innovation Unit, had done an OTA for Agile, because they looked at the KOC at LUD that says, why does it take 14 months to do a software upgrade? So they went out and they said, how can we do this faster? And the Silicon Valley folks came together and said, this is real Agile. You at DoD say you do Agile. Here's Agile. So, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
All right, thank you.